That's him. Jesus Christ. Look at him.
I don't know about you, but I am so pumped for Rockstar Lestat in season 3. I can barely keep still when I think about it. And it's not just because listening to Sam Reid's enchanting baritone makes me feel some type of way, or because rock music shaped a giant part of my identity. It's because ever since I learned about this intersection of my two obsessions, Vampire Chronicles and rock music, I've been clamoring for Rockstar Lestat to be done justice, because in my humble opinion, he hasn't been yet. I will expand on that later. And while I'm waiting for season 3 to pass the time and not to go mad with anticipation, I decided to comb through Lestat's and Vampire Chronicles musical connections and see how rock music found its place in gothic horror. So pick up the pace, pack up the gear, we're gonna have some. The first question is the most pressing. How did Lestat even end up being a rock star? Huh? What is even that storyline? To explain that, I'll start, as usual, from the beginning. Beware, there are going to be book spoilers. In 1985, Anne Rice wrote The Vampire Lestat, a sequel to Interview with the Vampire. In that book, she delved into Lestat's origins and his side of the story, already told by Louis in the previous installment. The book is basically one giant flashback, a story Lestat tells about himself, his confession, if you will. But it is tied to the then present day. It starts and ends with the events of 1985 when Lestat achieved musical stardom. But how? After the events of Interview with the Vampire, Lestat fell into a deep slumber. Vampires do that sometimes. And it lasted for decades. So one day he is awakened because he got interested in how the world has changed during his long sleep, and because he's a bit peckish, but most importantly because a rock band called Satan's Night Out was rehearsing in Lestat's vicinity, and he got a burning desire to join and jam with them. Before being reintroduced to the current times, Lestat introduces himself to the band members. The band just assumed he's kidding when he reveals his identity because they know his name from Interview with the Vampire, a book Daniel Molloy wrote and published, so they think Lestat is just some mad dude impersonating a fictional vampire. So this is how Lestat learns about Louis' interview and all the bullshit Louis made up about him. So Lestat decides to tell his own story. He writes an autobiography, yes, but he believes it's not enough to upstage Louis. So he joins the rock band and decides to lead them to stardom, hoping that this kind of attention will help him get back at and get together with Louis. He also longs a little for the thrill of a possible human-vampire clash, and deep down he hopes that attention to him will pull the attention away from Louis. Anyway, Lestat's rise to fame is instant because he shelled out some serious cash for the album and the music videos, and those were the uncomplicated times of MTV. He and his band become a sensation. They are highly conceptual since Lestat claims to be an actual vampire, and he tells his life story in songs and music videos. Lestat soaks up the fame and sets up a huge concert in San Francisco, which starts out as a total sold-out success. Unfortunately, it gets cut short because testy vampires have a beef with Lestat, revealing their nature to mortals, and because, as we'll learn later, Lestat's musical endeavors awakened Akasha, the queen of all vampires. But that's another story, literally. This is the cliffhanger of the Vampire Lestat, and the rest of the story is told in the third book, The Queen of the Damned. And that's it for Lestat's short-lived rock stardom. But it's not his only connection to music. The book establishes his artistic nature and love for the arts, especially music and theater. Lestat sings operas and plays the piano, and he's drawn to performing. For him, artists, musicians, actors are the conduits of goodness because they create beauty out of nothing and inspire people to feel emotions, and their art opposes chaos and meaninglessness of life. As a mortal, Lestat runs away from home to join the traveling Commedia dell'arte troupe, and then he becomes an actor in the Parisian theatre, renowned House of Thespians, which eventually becomes the Theatre of the Vampires. Because Lestat sees art and performance as an inherent goodness, he clings to it when he becomes a vampire, a creature of evil, since it's one of the only ways for him to achieve goodness. His rock career is a means of achieving the same goal. Lestat also becomes a rock star, partly because he wants to spread vampire lore through his songs in order to inspire mortals to eradicate vampires, and partly because he loves to play to an audience. He equates actors and musicians with saints, so the medium of rock music seems to him to be the perfect way to do good with his evil nature. I thought that as a symbol of evil, I'd do some good, he says in the book The Tale of the Body Thief. Anne Rice believed that being a rock star suited Lestat as a character, because just like he does, rock stars enthusiastically performed in a way that shocked and surprised audiences. Anne viewed vampires as outsiders, and for her, rock stars had similar qualities, namely in their refusal to accept lies and their desire for experiential intensity. This is how Lestat, or Anne, actually describes rock music in The Vampire Lestat. I was enchanted by the world of rock music, the way the singers could scream of good and evil, proclaim themselves angels or devils, and mortals would stand up and cheer. Sometimes they seemed the pure embodiment of madness, and yet it was technologically dazzling, the intricacy of their performance. It was barbaric and cerebral in a way that I don't think the world of ages past had ever seen. Also, there was something vampiric about rock music. It must have sounded supernatural, even to those who don't believe in supernatural. I mean, the way the electricity could stretch a single note forever, the way harmony could be layered upon harmony until you felt yourself dissolving in the sound. So eloquent of dread it was, this music. When creating Rockstat, Anne Rice was inspired by multiple rock stars. She was quoted saying that she based Lestat's voice on Jim Morrison and his music on The Doors' song L.A. Woman. At some other times, she also mentioned that she based Lestat's rockstar vibes on John Bon Jovi. So that leaves us with a mix of psychedelic and glam rock, which, in fairness, does feel a lot like Lestat. And in case you didn't know, Anne Rice used to post on Facebook pretending to be Lestat. Yes, she said that Lestat always lived in her and was a part of her. She was very unwell about him. So one time, Lestat answered the fans' question about music and his music preferences, and his answer shed some light on his relationship with music. So, according to Lestat, music can consume him entirely, and he's careful with it. He loves all kinds of music, but is especially fond of music of his mortal years, like Mozart and Vivaldi. He also likes 19th century opera and modern popular music, like aforementioned Morrison and Bon Jovi, as well as Tina Turner and Joan Jett. He also sometimes performs in New Orleans taverns with a guitar, since his rockstar days are unfortunately over. And that's about it about Book Lestat. I'm sure I missed something that I beg you to leave in the comments. And now we can turn to the musical connection of our beloved TV Lestat. In the AMC show, Rockstar Lestat will not come out of nowhere. There were plenty of indication of Lestat's love and propensity for music. So let's look at them. In the pilot episode, we learned that music was one of the reasons Lestat picked New Orleans as his home.
When I hear music playing and the shadows of men and women dancing by the water's edge, I disembarked for the music.
In this episode, he also notices and appreciates musicians when so few usually do.
And another round for the musicians, whatever they want, ils sont toujours oubliés.
But the most noteworthy is the fact that Lestat composes music.
What's that little song playing?
Do you like it? I composed it for a young violinist I once knew, a boy of infinite beauty and sensitivity.
We hear a composition that he wrote for a young violinist. We know this violinist to be Nicolas de Lioncourt, Lestat's mortal lover, who he brought to vampirism later. In the second episode, music plays a great role because it's the opera episode. Lestat and Louis go to the local production of Gaetano Donizetti's comic opera Don Pasquale.
Not another opera, Donizetti's comic masterpiece, Don Pasquale. I was an acquaintance of his, and I saw the premiere at the Salvento 73 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
Lestat claims that he was there when Donizetti wrote it, and that he attended its premiere in Paris in 1843. This actually contradicts his claim at the trial that he went underground after Nicky's death in 1796, just so you know that something fishy was going on there. But what's most interesting here is Lestat's attitude to art and the people who make it. Louis says that music is where Lestat separated man from food. This is very in tune with the book version of Lestat, for whom musicians and artists existed on a different plane. For this Lestat, artists were untouchable too, unless, of course, they made bad art. Then all bets were off.
So no more of your sound can pollute this world.
The next episode is also very musical for Lestat. He masterfully plays the piano, he is able to keep up with the band, and is equally good at classical and ragtime. Actually, Louis goes as far as saying that Lestat wrote Wolverine Blues, an early jazz standard, really written by Jelly Roll Morton.
Yes, that's it.
Should we believe this claim? For me, it sounds like it's either Louis trying to hype Lestat up for Daniel or Lestat hyping himself up for Louis. Either way, we get another proof that Lestat is a skilled musician. Then we have Come to Me. In the sixth episode, Lestat is trying to win Louis back and he writes a perfect love song. He was so meticulous about it that he played all the instruments when recording it.
He pressed only one album. Had the master recordings destroyed. You're listening to an inferior re-recording now.
Of course, he let his lover, Antoinette, sing on it, but well, it worked on Louis, so mission accomplished, I guess. We also hear a version of the song with Lestat's vocals and learn that he has a very nice singing voice. This version was probably recorded in the years between Louis and Lestat's tentative reconciliation and the murder attempt, but it's never specified, so we don't really know. In the second season, we have way less musical references regarding Lestat because most of the time he was a hallucination, but there are a couple of noteworthy moments. In the third episode, we see Louis conjure Dreamstat, who plays and sings a delightfully unhinged version of Come to Me. That song really got to Louis, huh? But most importantly, we see Lestat in his element, on stage, performing in front of an adoring audience. Of course, it is distorted by Armand's perception, who made Lestat a literal clown, because in the book, when Lestat was an actor, he played a romantic hero Lelio, not a comic servant Harlequin. But that's Armand. He probably hears clown noises every time Lestat opens his mouth. Even still, this part is important for understanding Lestat, because At the end of the day, no matter what motivations he has, he just enjoys performing. He enjoys making art, making theater, feeling the audience's energy, and soaking up their adoration. That's just who he is. At the end of season 2, we see him deprived of that energy. He is alone with an audience of a few mice, probably, burying himself alive figuratively instead of literally this time. But even in this state, he clings to music. He listens to it and he plays it on his pretend plank of a piano.
I'm sorry I don't have much time. I'm in the middle of rehearsing.
Rehearsing?
I'm going on tour.
He is defeated about his skills too, saying he needs at least 50 more years of practice until he's ready to perform. But we know he actually needed a little bit less, because the teaser dropped and we learned that Rockstar Lestat is coming. And we heard his first track, Long Face. What does the teaser tell us about Rockstat's music? Well, for one, I am infinitely grateful that it is unapologetically rock and roll. Some of the fans doubted the show would go the rockstar route, given the dire state of rock music in the current musical environment, but I firmly stood by the Rockstat because he can't be anything else, as evidenced by everything I just unearthed about the connection of rock music to vampirism and outsiderism. As for the musical influences, Long Face draws on glam rock, a little bit of Bowie, a bit of T-Rex, which is very obvious, but it was still confirmed by its composer, Daniel Hart. Hart also hears a bit of Nirvana there, and who am I to argue? As for the general musical vibe of the upcoming season, the showrunner, Rolling Jones, said that they'll try to beat Hedwig and the Angry Inch and Rocky Horror. So expect a lot of glam, humor, and camp. Rolling also dropped this insane list of musical influences.
David Bowie,
St. Vincent,
Bjork,
T-Rex,
Freddie Mercury,
Beastie Boys,
Franz Liszt,
Shostakovich,
Douglas Dare, Red Cross, Lang Lang, Iggy Pop, St. Vincent, Prince, Florence Welch, Jim Morrison, Tim Wick, Gustav Mahler, Brendan Flowers, Fiona Apple, Serge Gainsbourg, Electric Light Orchestra, The Sweet, Nick Cave, Raleigh Ritchie, Benjamin Clementine, Chapel Rowan, Gustav Dudamel, David Lee Roth, Ryan Cantor, John Cale, Jeff Magnum, Paul Westerberg, Martha Argerich, and Daniel Hart. It's going to be something like that.
It goes well with Daniel Hart's opinion that Lestat contains multitudes and will have as many influences as you would think a vampire as old as Lestat would have. This also tracks with that Facebook post where Anne channeled Lestat. He can't and won't be contained to a single genre, but I know that at his core he still will be rock and roll. If you remember, in the beginning I said that this time will hopefully be the first time Rockstar Lestat is adapted faithfully. But what about Queen of the Damned, you might ask? You probably won't, but let's have this thought exercise. Well, I'm glad you didn't ask. In 2002, Warner Brothers released a film adaptation of the third Vampire Chronicle novel, Queen of the Damned. This has made a lot of people very angry and been widely regarded as a bad move, all because it was a shameless cash grab. The studio was about to lose rights to Anne Rice's novels, so they decided to forgo the Vampire Lestat entirely because apparently it was too broad. And they decided to adapt the next novel, which was apparently simple, tight, and concise. I'm being sarcastic here. No wonder that in the final product there was pretty much nothing left of the novel, but I'm not here to critique the movie. It is bad by every standard, but it has its cringy, so bad it's good charm, and Aaliyah was mesmerizing there. But I'm here to talk about Lestat and music. And I have some words to say. First of all, you cannot tell me that Lestat's stand-in in the season 3 teaser was not a playful dig at Stuart Townsend's gloomy brunette Lestat from the movie. It's just obvious. Second of all, the music there is good, but it's not right. Let me explain. The music and all of Lestat's songs were written and performed by Jonathan Davis of the band Korn, with songwriting help from Richard Gibbs. And while watching the movie, I immediately recognized where the music was coming from, even without looking it up on Wikipedia, because it is hard to confuse Davis's nu metal with anything else, especially if you grew up in the 90s, like me. Due to some contractual obligations, Davis's vocals could not be included on the official soundtrack that was released separately as an album, so the songs were re-recorded with the vocals of the singers of such bands as Disturbed, Orgy, Papa Roach, Deftones, and Linkin Park. And if you know, these bands were the pillars of nu metal, and late 90s and early 2000s was a time when nu metal was in its heyday. It dominated the charts and the hearts of dispirited youth. This genre was characterized by rhythmic beats, solid structure, heavy riffs, a lack of guitar solos, and a mix of rock and rap-like singing. Of course, it has unmistakable vibe. Nu metal was angry, angsty, and nihilistic. Davis's soundtrack for Queen of the Damned is the same. It's heavy, aggressive, and it takes itself way too seriously, which is par for the course for the genre. But tell me, does that sound like our Brad Prince? Does that match enthusiastic, bold, defiant, vain, seductive Lestat? For me, the answer is obvious. It doesn't. Don't get me wrong, I think the music in the movie is great. I listen to it from time to time still, but it didn't reflect Lestat and his core as a character. So unfortunately, for me, it was a total musical mismatch. And speaking of musical mismatches, did you know that there was a whole Broadway musical about Lestat? Moreover, did you know that it was written by an iconic songwriting duo of Bernie Taupin and Elton freaking John? And did you know that it was a complete flop? Well, now you know. Lestat the Musical had a trial run in San Francisco in 2005 and got a lukewarm reception, but that was the purpose of a trial run, to figure out what works and what doesn't before hitting Broadway. And Lestat did hit Broadway. It hit so hard that Broadway decided to press charges. Lestat had a disastrous 2-month-long run and disappeared from the stage with a shameful whimper after 33 previews and 39 performances. It was such a giant flop that Elton John even refused to release the original cast recording, and the only way to listen to it now is through some bootlegged videos of dismal quality. But why was it such a disaster? Well, to put it frankly, it was just boring. One of the reviews called it the musical sleeping pill. The characters were tiresome, the story was too cramped, and it had those classic, sweeping Broadway tunes that are so interchangeable they could have been literally in any other show. And as I trudged through some of these recordings, I couldn't help thinking that the solution to this drudgery was right there. I mean, the book itself gives you the perfect setup for the musical. Lestat literally tells the world his story through a concept rock album and biographical music videos. So why not just take this concept and realize it on stage? Make it a Hedwig-style extravaganza. Lestat the Musical was such a missed opportunity and another musical fail of Lestat. So here's hoping that he doesn't face any more of those. So wow, I got tired. That was a lot. I hope you enjoyed this little foray into the musical side of the Vampire Chronicles, and I hope I made at least one of you more hyped for season 3 of the AMC show. So what are your thoughts on Lestat's musical journey through different media? What do you expect from him in the future? Well, let me know in the comments. This video took so long because I had to write the script for it twice. My first almost finished draft sadly perished along with all the other files when my laptop crashed. But I persevered and I wrote it all again. So please, if it's not too much hassle, give it a like and subscribe if you want to see me ramble more about vampires. And of course, I wish you all a very happy new year. I hope it blesses us with peace, health, happiness, and prosperity, and a season 3. So see you in 2025. Mwah.